as idam, this, is known as kshetra, and that which can be identified as this, know for sure it is not you. Now, this can also sometimes be related due to the differences of space or time as that. That moon, this earth. So, when you say that and this, it is indicating the distance, time, space, various parameters. So, anything that can be recognized as this world, this room, this experience, this body. When we look at our own emotions, my anger, the moment you say my anger, are there two elements there? I and my anger. So, the anger or various emotions that go through, can we identify it as this, these emotions, these decisions, these memories? Anything that can be identified as idam, as this, know it not to be yourself, because the self does not have any movement. It is called achala. Achala, kriyahina. It does not have to move anywhere. There is another thing to understand. If it has got another position to move to, then it is not all pervading. And that which is not all pervading cannot be eternal. And hence, therefore, it cannot be Paramatma. It cannot be this self. And therefore, the self is the one which does not have any movement. Vikriya nasti. Buddhehe bodho na jatviti. And also understand that the buddhi by itself does not have the capacity to know. That buddhi which we are so associated with, so much so that if anybody even by mistake says that you are buddhihina or you are a buddhu, buddhu means absence of buddhi, even by mistake says it, would we accept it? You are not intelligent if somebody makes this statement. Even to those whom everybody considers as the most dumb, even they will not accept that I am dumb. Why? The buddhi loves to claim the knowing aspect. But is it its original nature? It is not its original nature. It is a borrowed attribute. Anything that is borrowed as an attribute is vulnerable to be gone. See, in the olden days, when the boys' side would come to visit the girls' side for the first time, the arranged marriage setting. So, in the villages, outside the house, it is all decorated, it is all cleaned up, but then just for that day, to give a pretty good impression, you would borrow couple of bulls or bullocks from the neighbors, tight in front of your house. Couple of buffaloes and cows tight in front of your house. As many bulls, that many bullock carts lined up, just to give a feel. And make sure that you invite the girl's friends who are not fairer than the girl herself to accompany her for that day. All these are borrowed attributes. What happens to these borrowed attributes? Vulnerable to be gone one day. Anything that is borrowed as an attribute, which is not the nature, that which is not the swabhava or the swarupa, that which is a guna, will always be lost. Water has a guna of, has a swabhava of quenching thirst because of its coolness. But the water being hot or cold, it's a borrowed, acquired attribute. And anything that is acquired can be lost. So, if it is the coolness that is acquired, it will be lost. If it is the hotness that is acquired, that will be lost. If it is the taste that is added in, that also can be lost. If it is a flavor, that can be lost. Anything as an acquired quality will be lost. So, the buddhi, it is not its nature to know. Where is it getting its nature from? From the conscious principle. Buddhehe bodho na jatviti. Jivaha sarvam alam jnatva jnata drashteti muhyati. The jiva presents himself or herself. Actually, the jiva does not even have a gender. The thought of I does not have even a gender. It is just a thought. But what kind of body is the association to? It generates the feel. I am a man, I am a woman. As for that thought, it is genderless. So, this jiva, what does it do, the ego? Not understanding this, the ego, he or she thinks himself or herself to be the jnata, the knower, drashta, the seer, shrota, the listener, sota, the sleeper. Vakta, the speaker. Bhakta, the blabberer. Various of these attributes it acquires, and it decorates its presence and presents itself. Anything that is acquired can be lost. All the learning, and there is an experiment in the Chandogya Upanishad. So, this son comes back from the ashram, and the father is also a renowned scholar, he is a realized Mahatma. So, he calls up his father, his son, he is a very boisterous and at this moment a very arrogant achiever, because he is the, what do you call in this country, valedictorian. So he was the first in the university, in that Gurukula. The Guruji had praised him that he has learnt it all. So the father calls him. He says, "Hey Shvetaketu, beta Shvetaketu, have you learnt that, by learning which you don't need to learn anything else?" So the son looks at dad. Generation gap. "What do you think, Dad? I just wasted my time there." "Ask what you need to ask." So the father says, "Not today. You will be tested, but after an experiment." He says, "So the next 15 days, whenever you feel hungry, drink lots of water. Because that water, as long as you are drinking, the prana shakti is maintained. It will not quit from this body." I have experimented this, okay? So don't experiment it. In fact, for me, the 16th day also I continued and nothing happened. It was only on the 17th day I sat on the lecture, on the podium. I am told that I must have repeated that Om before Sahana Bhavatu at least 11 or 12 times. And that Sahana Bhavatu mantra itself I must have repeated 2-3 times. And I started sentence, I don't know where I have stopped. I am confused whether I have started it or not started it. So I keep repeating the sentence, or it is all a jumbled process. So Shvetaketu was asked to do that experiment. On the 16th day he was summoned. So the father asked, "Now tell me these basics." He asked a couple of questions. And the son is stumped, because he thinks he understands the question, but the answer is not there. And there is something very familiar. He knows it, but he cannot recall it. He says, "All your learning is in that shelf, which has to be constantly refreshed, and that medha shakti has to be provided. You pull that away, all that which you have learned becomes unlearnt." So I am not talking about this acquired knowledge. I am talking about that because of which you know everything. Do you know that? And that one discussion was sufficient for Shvetaketu, because he was really a brilliant kid, subtle mind and sharp intellect. He understood the limitations. He said, "Dad, I don't know. I sincerely ask you to guide me into that." Until something such experience happens, which shatters that existing conviction. What is the conviction? That I know everything, that everything that happens is me who is doing it. Some strong conviction has to be broken there. For some it is a very sad experience or a bad experience that really jitters them out of it. For many, logical thinking should be able to change that conviction, which the intellect is carrying forward. Thinking that I am the knower, I am the seer, I am the doer. All this is borrowed from the conscious principle, whose very job is to know. And that is why they say that the self is beyond the intellect. The intellect cannot process, and the self is not a result of a process. So trying to understand it through the intellect is a mere waste of a process. Then you might immediately have to ask a question. If by now that question has not come in your minds, and generating one thought in your minds, then what exactly are we doing right now? If the intellect's processing cannot yield, intellect is a phase wherein it has to carry the clarity. Unless it has that clarity and its convictions are changed, we cannot progress forward. Hence, therefore, this is an educating process to change that conviction. Because unless that conviction is changed, the intellect will keep stopping any progress towards understanding the knowing principle or being the knowing principle. It will keep stopping. And how does it stop? With its enquiries, questions. Amazing kinds of questions that it can create, generate. And all the signs that we have or we will have is limited only at the intellectual level. That is why Vivekananda ji said it long time ago. He said, that where science stops, spirituality starts. And some of them very intelligently have coined the science of spirituality. That where the processing stops, undoing happens, that is where actually the spirituality is beginning. Until then, whatever we are doing on the name of spirituality is to clean, polish and fine tune the equipments so that we become qualified for that vidya to happen, for that avidya to be dispelled. There is a purpose of karma, there is a purpose for upasana or bhakti, there is a purpose for japa, there is a purpose for yajna, yaga, there is a purpose for the satsanga, but none of them will yield realization. For example, early in the morning, frantically you are searching for your glasses. And we have instructed somebody to do japa. Eyeglasses, eyeglasses, eyeglasses. Do you think it is going to create the eyeglasses? Then you have the puja. What is the puja? Eyeglass puja. Do you think it is going to generate eyeglasses? You have forgotten that it is right on your nose bridge. And what is required at that moment? To cognize, rather to recognize. You know that you have glasses, but you have forgotten its placement. So you are recognizing it right there. So when you experience the realization of the eyeglasses, yes, there is a jubilance that you found them. But after having realized the eyeglasses, how is the experience of realizing them? It is not a very great experience either. Why? It's a humbling experience. It puts you back in perspective. So here it is said, the jiva, not knowing this simple way of working, considers himself or herself as the strongest, the most brilliant, the most achieving. All this at a material sense may make some sense, but in a spiritual sense means nothing. Because what has happened is that forgetfulness of the self, by the self. And what is required is remembrance, recognition, knowing what I am. Jivaha sarvam alam jnatva jnata drashteti muhyati. And in such instances, Vedanta cannot resist itself without giving the classic example. Do you know what is the classic example of Vedanta? Rope and the snake. It happened recently. It happened to me only. I was watering a patch of jasmine plants. This is in the beginning of December, or the day we had raffle actually. That day in the morning, around 9:30, 10 o'clock, I was watering the jasmine plants. I was in the lawn area where the green patch, so I was standing there and watering. Usually I go to such backyard barefoot. That day I was wearing some kind of a footwear. I think flip-flops. Then as I was watering, sometimes the lungi gets, the bottom part gets wet, and because of the wind it hits the feet. So initially I thought it was the breeze and my lungi which might have been wet which was hitting my foot. I didn't pay attention, but the intensity with which it was hitting drew my attention. So I picked my lungi up and looked. There was something which was moving and hitting. And being a Vedantist, I was trying to see, is it a rope under tension that it was moving with some spring kind of an action? Then I realized it was a scaled tail. And luckily, I was standing on the head portion and the tail portion was hitting me. Imagine if it were the other way around. There's so much of analysis and so much of a smile would not have been there. And it took me a while for that to dawn, that this is not rope, this is snake. Because I keep giving the example of the other kind, that we misinterpret the rope to be a snake. So it took me a while, and the moment I realized that it was a snake, growing up in schools and colleges, I have had long jump, which is a forward motion. So you run up and then from a baseline, you jump forward, and I was good at it. This is the first time I realized that I am equally effective in backward jump. But for that trigger point, I had to have a snake underneath. I jumped and it really reversed, at least quite a distance, and then got up. And that day I fell on my left hand. It still hurts, almost 2 months plus, it still is sprained. So I got up, I got to a higher platform knowing that that snake would not reach. And poor fellow, under my weight, under my pressure, must have been suffocated. It was this long, and I took a photograph of it, snapped it, and I cross-checked it on the internet. And the closest it was the copperhead. I said, holy cow, I was safe. So there was a Brahma that it might be maybe my lungi. Even after looking at it, the Brahma was maybe it is a rope under tension. But the moment I realized that it was not rope, it was a snake, I catapulted myself backward. Boom. A similar example given here. First, let us read the shloka. Rajju sarpavadaatmanam Jivam jnatva bhayam vahet Naham jivah paratmeti Jnataschennirbhayo bhavet. Rajju sarpavadatmanam. You mistake the rope to be a snake. And when you mistake a rope to be a snake, it appears exactly like a snake. Have you ever touched a snake? Have you ever had an experience of holding a snake? I have had, the experience here was, we had a snake show here. Remember, for our kindergartners to 5th grade, one of the lock-ins. So he had a 30-footer. And I said, hold it. The first thing that you feel, it is cold to touch. The second, is it very scaly. Third, it is very slimy, slippery. Fourth, added to that slippery nature, it has that movement which makes it even more difficult to hold. So, these are various attributes of snake. When you see a rope to be a snake, do you find any one of these qualities in that rope? None whatsoever. But we mistake that rope to be a snake. Why did that mistake happen? Inadvertently, because of your past experience or whatever it be. At that moment, your mind or intellect decided it was a snake. And you almost froze looking at that snake. You wanted to shout for help, but only air was coming out. Why? Nothing was working. Because of that anxiety, fear. And though it was a cold evening, you had beads of sweat developed out of that fear. And your child, your son who was walking from that door out where you are standing, and you are about, you can't even, you are so scared. As soon as they open the door, in that light of that door, you relax. Why? You have seen that it is not a snake, that it was just a rope. Now, why did that rope appear like a snake? Was it like a magic or a miracle or some kind of a thing happening? No. It was sheer ignorance of the rope, isn't it? The moment you realize that it is rope, what happened to all the fear, anxiety and various traumatic effects of that? Vanished, gone. Another important aspect, that portion of it which you could ascertain was rope, there was another part of it which was still hidden. Do you have to go check the other end also to make sure that it is a rope and not a snake? That is why they say, if you know even this much, you know it all. Maybe what I am seeing is a rope, but I am so freaked out, maybe the other end is still snake. Is it a possibility? That is why in the path of spirituality, either you are realized or you are still the ego. There is no intermediary in between percentages of growth in spirituality. Either you are realized or you are not. I think I am 55% realized. Another 45%, few more years I will be there. It doesn't work that way. Either you are realized or you are not. In the process of purifying, tuning, there can be gradations. But in realization as such, either you know it or you don't. And the moment you know that you are that self within, what creates all these fears, anxieties and frustrations? It is the essence of ego. The moment you know that you are that self, that identifier, the identifying entity is gone. So, the source of all miseries, when it is gone, when will it go away? Jnataha chen nirbhayo bhavet. Only when we realize our true nature. Up until then, there will be various interesting facets of the ego that will keep triggering fears, anxieties, miseries, dukkha, various things that we go through. Until then, it is quite natural to be anxious and fearful. It is not to justify and say, okay, I am an ego, I have to be fearful and like this only. It is not to justify that, but it is just to say that it is but natural, that wherever there is that sense of separateness, divisions, these kinds of fears will always exist. Continuing, he continues to say, Atma vabhasayat yekaha, Atma vabhasayat yekaha, buddhyadinindriyanyapi, indriyanyapi, Deepo ghatadivat swatma, jadaistarnavabhasyate. So here he says, just as the Deepaha ghatadivat. Deepaha, the lamp, illumines anything that is in front of it. Whatever is in front of it. So, here he takes the example that in front of that particular lamp there was a ghata, a pot, and the pot is illumined. The pot is illumined not because of its own nature of self-illumination. It is only illumined because of the presence of that lamp. Similarly, the mind and intellect have different thoughts, and it is the job of the conscious principle to keep illumining it. In fact, in the state of spiritual glory, it does not matter whether your mind and intellect have thoughts or not, whether your mind and intellect have speed thoughts or slow thoughts. It does not matter what even the content of the thought is being carried from the highest state of spiritual glory. Why? Because the self is other than the thought and its content. Goodness and badness exist only in the realm of the mind and intellect. From the standpoint of the self, nothing is good, nothing is bad. Why? Because essentially everything is divine. They are not bifurcating it on the standpoints of polarities, good versus bad, justified versus unjustified. No bifurcations. So, it really does not matter from that standpoint what kind of thoughts or what kind of texture of thoughts, what kind of contents in those thoughts. Because whatever be that content, I am the illuminator, they are the illumined. And that which is being illumined cannot reach out and corrupt the illumining factor. Atma avabhasati ekaha buddhyadi indriyanyapi. Whether the movement is in the buddhi, whether it is in the memory, whether it is in the mind, whether it is the movement of the organs of perception and action, all of them are illumined at the same time by that one illumining factor. Just as the lamp illumines that which is in front of it. Similarly, the mind, the sense organs, the sense organs in indiscipline, the mind and its likes and dislikes, the intellect and its lack of direction or clarity. It does not affect the illumining factor. See, when you look up, are there stains on the roof? Look up. Are there stains on the roof? Is the light illumining those stains? Is it illumining the other part of the roof which is not having any stain? From the light's perspective, does it really matter what it is illumining? Whether it is stained or non-stained? It does not matter. Because its illumination is not limited by either the stains or the absence of stains. Everything that is illumined. Whether it is somebody who is brilliant to understand is illumined in that light, somebody who is not brilliant and trying to focus and grasp, doesn't matter. It will illumine the same. Does the sun shine in US? I may be asking a very foolish question, but you answer. Does the sun shine in the US? Does it shine differently than back in India? Because in India you do lot of arghya and you do the Surya Upasana, Surya Mantra and lot of puja for Surya Bhagwan. Does he shine differently there? Whether you worship or you don't worship, it is the nature of that sun to give light and heat. And that worship is not for the sun, it is for our benefit that we offer it to the sun. From the sun's perspective, he does not see it as different. Here it is also spick and span clean. The adjacent neighbor, what does he have? It's a garage. There will be lots of stains, oil and what do you call that? Grease and other things, it's all over the place. Does the space called Chinmaya Chitrakut become purer or more divine than the space adjacent because of its stains? The space doesn't get contaminated. It does not get affected. Similarly, is the conscious principle which does not get influenced by what it is illuminating. Then why are we focusing on trying to change all the sense organs into a disciplined pattern, trying to remove all the likes and dislikes from the mind and try to bring clarity in the intellect? When you reach to that point, it does not matter what these three carry, unless these are stabilized. Going forward to reach that is an impossible task. Hence, therefore, bring them to a tuned track. I can quickly jump beyond these limitations to know and to be as that unlimited being of consciousness. And what is that being of self-consciousness? Self as the consciousness. That is stated in the 29th shloka. We will read the shloka, see it tomorrow. Svabodhe nanyabodhecha bodharupata yatmanaha nadipasyanyadeepecha yatha svatma prakashane. This is about the self-illumining nature. That we will see tomorrow. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shant Shant Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.